There is an unprecedented and growing revolution of people awakening their consciousness taking place around the world today. Are you a part of that revolution? I'll be back in a moment and we'll take a closer look at that question. Our primitive ego loves to blame. As a result, the law of karma is often one of humanity's least honored and most ignored basic laws of the universe. Karma is simply the concept that every choice we make, or fail to make, will give us a consequence or an outcome. Always. I find it really amazing how often humans blame outside circumstances for the life that they're living, rather than connecting the circumstances of their life to the past choices that they've made or failed to make. It's one of the major blind spots in the human consciousness. In other words, our primitive ego would prefer to be a victim and blame the universe for the circumstances of our life, rather than to take personal responsibility for our life, the life that we've created for ourselves one choice at a time. There are two examples of failed karma. Example number one. On August 6, 1945, we lost our innocence as a species. On that day, we learned for the first time in human history that our species had the power to extinguish human life on this planet. That was the day that a nuclear weapon was detonated over Hiroshima. We still have not come together as a species to remove nuclear weapons from the world. The very real potential for the extinction of our species still exists, unfortunately. Example number two. Today we are facing another global extinction event. It's called global climate change. Despite the fact that virtually every credible environmental scientist on the planet is warning that global warming is rapidly threatening the extinction of life as we know it on our planet, including the extinction of the human species, 37% of our nation's collective primitive egos would rather believe the scientifically illiterate naysayers that insist, without any supporting scientific data to back their claims, they claim that global warming is simply a natural reoccurring event on our planet, one that can be comfortably and safely ignored. The consciousness now of those who deny the reality of global warming represents a fairly serious dumbing down of their human ability to embrace reality. Their primitive egos would rather believe the scientifically illiterate naysayers and their opinions than the warnings of the highly trained environmental scientific community. In both examples, our collective human consciousness would rather embrace the passive role of powerless victim than accept active responsibility for the realities that face us as a species. There is a simple reality, and that is that humanity is beginning to awaken. While the majority of our world is comfortable within the role of passive victim, there is a rapidly growing global community of people who are choosing to intentionally awaken to the dangers that face us. They are no longer comfortable living as powerless victims. They represent a growing revolution in human consciousness. But contrary to popular opinion, they are not about violence for the sake of violence. Their presence in the world reminds us that social revolutions are always about ideas. For example, The global unrest that we're witnessing in countries around the world is clear evidence that humanity is awakening to more intentionally claim the personal freedoms that are currently being denied to them by despotic governments. The growing revolution in human consciousness is seen very clearly when the collective consciousness of our planet socially awakens and begins to speak about the dangers of global warming. Again, it's seen clearly in the growing rejection of racism, homophobia, and the rampant gender bias propagated by scientifically illiterate religious extremists who would rather embrace primitive religious beliefs than informed scientific evidence. The collective consciousness of humanity is beginning to awaken. People are beginning to connect the dots between their choices and the consequences those choices are creating in the world. When a person's beliefs or opinions lead to the rejection of overwhelming scientific evidence, it's clear evidence that the unconscious primitive ego of their inner child and its childhood conditioning is in control of their consciousness. Stated simply, they have not yet awakened and evolved their human consciousness. They are still functioning out of the powerless victimization of an immature or infant human consciousness. For those with an awakened consciousness, on the other hand, any belief or opinion that cannot be backed up with hard evidence or supporting data no longer has the same weight as hard scientific evidence. This is true regardless of the source of the belief or the opinion. For an awakened consciousness, reality carries more freight, more weight than an opinion or an unsupported belief. The growing global evolution and the awakening of human consciousness is not simply a good idea. It is essential to the future of our human species. The probability of evolutionary survival is always increased by the ability of a species to embrace the reality of what is. Those species unable to embrace reality are now extinct. If you would like to read more or listen more to these kinds of ideas, be sure to click the links below